So today we are going to discuss about the waxes that we used in the dentistry, and a lot of wax that has been used for the used in the dentistry in the during the fabrication of the tooth as well as the complete denture. So we are going to discuss properties of the wax. What are the different types of wax? What are the how it affect the shape and size of the restoration? All the things we are going to discuss. Okay. So first definition, dental wax but dental wax can be defined as the thermoplastic molding material that is solid at the room temperature, and when subjected to moderate temperature becomes a low viscosity liquid. So this is the definition. So when at the room temperature it is solid, but when a mild temperature, a mild temperature, when subjected to a slight change in the temperature, it will become liquid. So when the mild temperature means at the room temperature, it should be solid. When it is placed in the oral cavity, it should be soft. So this is the main property of the more waxes that has been used in the dentistry in the oral cavity, whereas the wax that has been used in the lab has got some other properties. So all the things will be discussed in this chapter. Okay. So how it is classified? The classification of the dental wax. Dental wax is broadly divided into pattern wax to take the patterns of the prepared tooth, impression wax to take the impression of the edentulous area, and processing wax for the processing of the complete denture or any other procedures and it is done. So it is broadly divided into three. One is pattern, to take the pattern of the tooth. Second is to take the impression of the edentulous area, or then comes the processing wax for the processing of the complete denture or the ceramic crown. Okay, so these are the classification of the dental wax. Okay. Now comes the composition. The composition of the dental wax is paraffin wax, paraffin wax is the major component of the wax, dental wax. Then comes the bee wax can be used, carnauba wax, candilia wax, resin, gum tamer, synthetic wax and resin, and coloring agent. So these are the main composition ingredients of the wax, mainly the dental wax. So around a majority of the major content of the wax is paraffin wax. Okay, so all other waxes are added to maintain the properties, to change or alter the properties of the wax according to our need. Okay, so these are the main compositions. Okay, so what are the properties of the wax? The mechanical properties are, the dental wax have a low mechanical property which are depending on the temperature. So the mechanical properties mainly depends upon the temperature. At low temperature, at a high temperature, it will become solid liquid, whereas in this low temperature, it may become liquid. It may become solid. So the properties is depending upon the temperature. So mainly the oral temperature is used as the standard to maintain the wax in a proper without any distortion. Okay. Then comes increase in temperature result in decrease in mechanical property of the dental wax. Then comes the modulus of elasticity, proportional limit, and compressive strength are low for the waxes. So what these are the properties of wax. One is the mechanical property. The mechanical property of dental wax have a low mechanical property which are depending upon the temperature. Increase in temperature will result in Increase in temperature result in the decrease in the mechanical properties of the dental wax. Then comes the modulus of elasticity, proportional limit, and compressive strength are law for the waxes. The thermal changes and the dimension. Flow of the wax depending on the force. We apply force. The flow of wax depending on the force we apply and the temperature. So the flow is depending upon the force and the temperature. The wax expand when the temperature is raised and contract on cooling. The wax have a high coefficient of thermal expansion. Because of the high coefficient of thermal expansion causes distortion. This can be avoided by utilizing the impression as early as possible. So the thermal properties, as the temperature changes, it can cause the distortion of the wax. So the impression should be cast or should be placed as early as possible. Otherwise, it will result in the distortion. Okay. Then comes the rheological properties, the study of deformation and the flow of matter. It is the measure of a wax ability to deform under light force. The flow of wax is desirable as a part of the modeling process or working time, but become undesirable after the wax pattern or the impression has been made. So rheological properties, that is study of deformation and the flow of matter. It is the measure of wax ability to deform under light force. So the wax, it is the ability of the wax to deform under light force. So the flow of the wax is desirable as a part of modeling process or working time, but it becomes undesirable after the wax pattern or the impression is made. So initially, that means, but during the impression take, it should have a proper flow. After the wax pattern is taken, it is undesirable. It is better. It should not flow. Otherwise, flow result if the wax flow property is small, it will cause in the distortion of the wax pattern. So these are the property. One of the property of the wax, that when light pressure is applied, it may result in the distortion. Okay. So now we'll discuss. These are the properties. So what are the properties? One is properties of the wax of mechanical property. That is, as the temperature increases, the mechanical property decreases. These are the one of the band was a low and secondly, it has got a low mechanical property when compared with any other materials in the dentistry. Then comes the modulus of elasticity and proportional limit and the compressive strength are low for the waxes. Then comes thermal property. So when the wax expand on heat and contract on cooling, so this will also result in some amount of distortion of the impression. And the third point is it has got high coefficient of thermal expansion. This is also result in the distortion. Because of the high coefficient thermal expansion cause distortion. So we have to be cast the impression as early as possible. Okay. Now comes the rheological property. So it's a study of deformation or the flow of matter. It is the measure of a wax ability to deform under what is the if the wax should be, at least the wax have some amount of resistance to prevent deformations under light pressure. If it is deformed under light pressure, it can cause distortion during the impression taking. Okay, so the wax should have some ability to withstand deformation under light pressure. Now comes to the inlay wax. The inlay wax is a specialized dental wax that can be applied onto the prepared cavity or to the dies to form a direct or indirect pattern, respectively. For example, inlay, the crown, the fixed partial denture by the lost wax technique. Okay, so inlay wax is mainly used for the preparation of the crown, the partial FPD, and the crown by the lost wax technique. The classification of inlay wax are type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is a medium wax and a soft wax used for direct pattern, and for the soft wax is used for the indirect pattern. Direct patterns means the impression is directly taken from the prepared, from the oral cavity, from the that is impression is directly taken from the prepared cavity as the oral cavity, whereas the indirect means impression is made, cast is poured, and from that the impression is taken from the die. That is indirect technique. Okay, so inlay wax is classified into two, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is a medium, type 2 is soft. Type 1 medium is used for the direct technique, whereas the soft wax is used for the indirect technique. What are the ideal requirements? The ideal requirements of the inlay wax is close adaptation to the prepared tooth when used for a direct pattern. Close adaptation, this should give a proper dimension of the prepared cavity. That means it doesn't have any distortion. It should have a low coefficient of thermal expansion. If the thermal expansion is small, it will result in a distortion. It's a good cohesion to the prepared. It should be properly adherent to the prepared cavity. Carving after it's cooled down, we should provide a proper carving of the occlusal anatomy without any flaking or chipping. Must not leave any desired when dewaxing. It should not leave after dewaxing. There should be any residual of the wax and should harden at room temperature and remain plastic at the temperature slightly above the oral temperature. It should be hardened at the oral. It should harden at the oral temperature and remain plastic at the temperature slightly above the oral temperature. Okay. Otherwise, otherwise it can cause damage, injury to the oral cavity. Flow must be minimum in the oral temperature to reduce distortion, and color contrast must be there for the proper carving. So these are the ideal requirements. Ideal requirements means it must be close adaptation should be there, should have a low coefficient of thermal expansion. Otherwise, it will cause distortion. Good cohesion should properly adhere to the prepared cavity. Carving should be done of the occlusal anatomy without any flaking or chipping. Must not leave any residues when dewaxed. There should be around the after dewaxing, there should be any residual part of the wax. It should harden at the oral temperature and remain plastic slightly above the oral temperature, and it must be flow must be minimum in the oral temperature. The minimum flow in the oral cavity to prevent distortion, and color contrast should be there for the proper carving. Okay, these are the ideal requirements of the inlay wax. What are the properties of inlay wax? The properties of the inlay wax: thermal property, coefficient of thermal expansion. The paraffin wax, the highest coefficient of thermal expansion. The wax is added. So to modify the wax is added, that is B wax, convex added to decrease the coefficient of. So normally the coefficient, because the paraffin wax has a high coefficient of thermal expansion. To reduce that, wax is added, that is B wax and carnauba wax is added to reduce the coefficient of thermal expansion. Decreasing the coefficient of thermal expansion decrease the distortion. Okay, so the inlay wax, the carnauba wax and B wax is added to reduce the coefficient of thermal expansion, to reduce the distortion. The physical property, homogeneity. The components of the wax are evenly distributed so that it will have a same property throughout. So the components should be evenly distributed, so they have a same property throughout the throughout the impression or the pattern. Okay, contact angle. Inlay should have a low contact area. That is when material should be spread easily. So the contact area. So what are the one of the advantage of the inlay wax is that contact angle. It has got a low contact. So it is when heat is applied, it will spread easily on the prepared area, prepared cavity. Okay. The flow permits the flow at 1% 37 degrees centigrade, and for type 2, 1% and 30 degrees centigrade. So the flow. So it is allow permissible flow of the inlay wax in the prepared cavity. Okay. So everything is under the temperature in the depending upon the body temperature. The flow of the inlay wax is primarily depending upon the body temperature. Okay. Now ductility. The inlay wax should have a moderate ductility. It allows the wax to be more plastic so that it will be deformed, rather than it fracture. So ductility, that is moderate. The wax has got a moderate ductility. This allows the wax to be more plastic so that it deform, it will never fracture. That is the one ductility. That is the one inlay wax has got the wax has got should be have moderate ductility. So one of the advantages, it will never fracture, only it will deform. The residual stress, most important cause of distortion. This can be minimized by working the wax at high temperature or preheat the dies. Okay, the second is invest the preparation wax as early as possible. Now comes the residual stress. Residual stress is the most important cause of distortion. This can be minimized by working the model at a high temperature, or by preheating the dies. Okay. So the second is investing the prepared wax as early as possible. So this is the one is to prevent the residual stress will be there in the wax. So this can cause the distortion. So this can be minimized by working the wax at high temperature and by preheating the dies. The second is, that is one step. And second is investing the prepared wax pattern as early as possible. What is the chemical property? During the firing, a lost wax should be completely oxidized to water vapor and carbon dioxide. So during firing, the lost wax technique, that is once the wax is placed in the furnace, it should be completely leave the prepared cavity without any residue. That is, it is oxidized to water vapor and carbon dioxide. Okay. Now comes this is the regarding the inlay wax. So inlay wax is mainly, so inlay wax is a specialized dental wax that can be applied onto the prepared cavity or to the dies to form a direct or indirect pattern. Okay. So it is mainly divided into inlay, crown, FPD, or lost wax by the lost wax technique. It is classified into type 1 is medium wax and type 2 is a soft wax. Type 2 is a soft wax used for indirect technique. That is in the type. Okay. The ideal requirements. The close adaptation should be there. It has got should have a low coefficient thermal expansion, otherwise it will cause distortion. It has good cohesion. That is good. Properly adapt to the prepared cavity. Carving without it can able to carve the wax without any chipping or flaking. Must not leave any residues when dewaxing. So a complete wax should be removed from the prepared cavity and should be hardened at oral temperature and remain plastic at a temperature slightly above the oral temperature. And flow must be minimum in the oral cavity to reduce distortion, and coloring agent, coloring contrast must be there for the proper carving. Okay. That comes to thermal property, coefficient thermal expansion, coefficient thermal expansion. That is, paraffin has got a highest coefficient thermal expansion. To reduce the coefficient thermal expansion, more wax is added. That is V wax and Carnot wax, which has got low coefficient thermal expansion. So decreasing the coefficient thermal expansion, decreasing distortion, the homogeneity. The property of the component of the wax are evenly distributed, so that it have had a same composition throughout the wax. So same property. Okay. The contact angle, the inlay wax got a low contact angle, so that it will melt. When melted, it is spread out easily, and flow, permit flow for the type 1 is 1% at 37 degrees centigrade, and for type 2 it is 1% at 30 degrees centigrade. Ductility. Ductility, that is, inlay wax should have a moderate ductility. This allows the wax to be more plastic, so that it will deform rather than fracture. So ductility should be there. So it will deform, but it will never fracture. Residual stress. One of the main disadvantage of the wax for continuous cooling and heating, it has got to produce residual stress. So to prevent the residual stress, we should work at a high temperature or by preheating the die. Second is invest the prepared wax pattern as early as possible to prevent the distortion. The chemical properties, it should be oxidized properly on dewaxing. It should be oxidized into water, carbon dioxide, water vapor and carbon dioxide without leaving any residue. Okay. Now comes the casting wax. Casting wax is mainly, the composition is almost same as the inlay wax. Available in sheet or preform shape. It is used in mainly in the metallic framework of RPD, base plate or modeling wax. Composition is almost same as the inlay wax. Available in red or pink in color, 8.5 centimeter wide, 15 centimeter long, and 1.5 centimeter thick. So these are the casting wax. Casting wax is mainly used for the fabrication of metallic framework of the RPD. Okay, so this is the casting wax. It is composition is almost same as the inlay wax. Almost properties is also same as the inlay wax. It is available in red color or pink in color. That is 8.5 centimeter wide, 50 centimeter long, and 1.5 centimeter thick. That is casting wax. Okay, casting wax is mainly used in the laboratories. Okay. Now comes the type 1. That is classification. The type 1 is soft wax for building condos and veneers. Type 2 is medium wax used for the fabrication of the pattern in the mouth. And type 3 is the hard wax used for fabrication of pattern in the mouth, preferred in a hot weather. So these are the classification: type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 2 is a soft wax for the building of the contour and veneer. Type 2 medium wax for the fabrication of pattern in the mouth. And type 3 is for, it is the fabrication of the pattern in the mouth, prefer in the hot weather. Okay. Uses. It is mainly used for the impression of the occlusal rim, holding the artificial tooth to the base plate, extension of the impression tray, pattern of the orthodontic appliance, checking the occlusal clearance after the crown preparation, spaces in the cast tray or the complete denture. So these are the, this is about regarding the base plate. Okay. or the modeling wax. Now comes the sticky wax. Sticky wax is usually used to for sticking the two fractured uh, part of the denture. Okay, property of adhering to the surface of various material. Composition: yellow beeswax, paraffin, and rosin. Uses: it is in the dental clinic or lab for holding the broken piece of the denture together and the compounds of the FPD. So sticky wax is, does the name indicate, it is for sticking of the sticking of the uh, fractured fractured of the complete denture or by the FPD. Okay, so FPD. So this is the sticky wax. Now comes the bite registration wax. So bite registration wax, the composition is paraffin wax, resin, and beeswax. It may also contain alumina and copper particles. Its usage is to take the jaw relation, bite registration to transfer to the die stone model, and bite registration to evaluate the occlusal clearance and accurate fabrication of the prosthesis. Okay, so bite. So what are the different types of waxes we studied? This one we studied in lab wax. Then comes the casting wax. Casting wax is casting wax. It's the same as the inlay wax. Available, it is a casting wax. It is same as the inlay wax. So the property is also same as the inlay wax. It is available in the sheet or preformed shape. It is usually uses in the metallic framework of the RPD. It is mainly. So this is the casting wax. The base plate is or the modeling wax. It is almost. It is a composition is almost same as the inlay wax. So the property is also same as the inlay wax. Available in the red or pink in color. That is 8.5 centimeter, 15 centimeter long, and 1.5 centimeter thick. Okay. Now comes the classification. The type 1 is soft for building up the contour of the veneer. Type 2 is a medium wax used for the fabrication of a pattern in the mouth. And type 3 is hard waxes used for the fabrication of the pattern in the mouth, preferred in the hot weather. Okay, so it's mainly used for the occlusal rim, holding the artificial teeth to the base plate, extension of the impression tray, pattern for the odontic appliance, checking of the occlusal clearance after the crown preparation, says crown preparation, and spacer in the cast tray for complete denture. So these are the main uses of the base plate. Okay, or the base plate or the modeling wax. Okay, now comes the sticky wax. As the name indicates, it is used for the sticking of the two part of the denture or any other material. Okay, oh, okay. So properties of adhering to the surface of the various material composition is yellow beeswax, paraffin, and resin. Uses in a dental clinic and lab for holding the broken piece of the denture together and components of the of PD. Then comes bite registration. Composition is a paraffin wax, resin, beeswax. It may also containing alumina and copper particles used to record jaw relation, bite registration to transfer to the die stone and the models, and bite impression to evaluate the occlusal clearance and accurate fabrication of the processes. So this is the different types of waxes used in the dentistry. Okay, thank you.